Hello, this is Max. Today's story is about a crazy grandfather and his grandson who embarked on a journey, fully enjoying themselves along the way. You can subscribe to the channel after watching. It helps us a lot in realizing the content. Jason Kelly, an accomplished lawyer, attends his grandmother's funeral. While dealing with colleagues, his cousin Nick arrives and falsely claims their grandma was murdered, fueling a conspiracy theory. Nick's antics draw attention, prompting Jason's controlling fiancée, Meredith, to intervene. Meredith urges Jason to silence Nick, who agrees only if Jason gives him a hug. Afterward, the funeral takes place with the presence of Jason's grandfather, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Kelly, a U.S. Army veteran. Following the funeral, Nick engages the priest in a conversation, divulging his explicit experiences as a dog breeder. Meanwhile, Jason's father, David, talks to Richard about his plan to drive to Florida, which Richard can't do alone due to lacking a driver's license. Richard wants Jason to take him there, although Jason's impending wedding and work commitments make it challenging. Richard convinces them that the trip will be short, and Jason reluctantly agrees. Jason uses Meredith's car to drive Richard to Boca Raton. During a lunch stop, Richard notices Jason working and learns that he's with his father's law firm. Richard is surprised, as he believed Jason wanted to be a photographer. Jason explains the practicality of working for his father's firm. Richard sarcastically acknowledges the idea of law being fun and steps out briefly, during which Jason is recognized by a lady named Shadia from a photography class. Shadia's friend Bradley learns that Jason is a Florida alumnus, sparking a conversation about a bucket list item for their friend Lenore: to be secluded with a freshman, an alumnus, and a professor. Lenore mentions having already fulfilled the alumnus requirement and now seeks a professor. In that moment, Shadia decides to greet Jason, who is preoccupied with work and accidentally mistakes her for a waitress, giving her payment. Offended, Shadia takes the money and flees with her friends. Jason soon realizes the situation and chases after them as they encounter car trouble. The car not starting forces them to face Jason. Amidst this, Richard surprises them, posing as a Georgia professor, and flirts with Shadia. Lenore joins in, but her friends restrain her. Shadia rushes the conversation, stating they're headed to Daytona Beach. Lenore makes a crude advance towards Richard, and they depart. Later, Richard shifts his attention from golf with Jason to flirt with women nearby. He exaggerates his skills, portraying himself as a retired astronaut and professional golfer. A misunderstanding arises when Jason calls him grandpa in front of the women, leading Richard to subtly disassociate from him. The shifting narratives scare off the women, upsetting Richard. A disagreement follows, with Jason accusing Richard of disrespecting their late grandmother. Richard claims his wife encouraged him to explore after her passing. Annoyed, they conclude and agree to focus on golf. They later receive a risque photo from Lenore, sparking Richard's determination to go to Daytona. During their drive through Daytona, Meredith calls, but the phone drops. Stuck in traffic, the call goes on speaker, and Meredith learns they're in Daytona. Furious, she demands Jason call her from Richard's house in Boca. Jason frets over Meredith's reaction, and Richard comforts him with random quotes. A masked man enters, panicking them, but it's the store clerk, Pam. After confirming they're not police, he offers substances, which they decline. They head to the beach to join Shadia's group. At the beach, Richard flirts with Lenore, while Jason engages in photography talk with Shadia. Chalk friends of the women, Cody and Bra, appear and tensions rise. Richard and Cody almost fight, but Bra defuses it and leads the women away. Lenore directs Richard to the hotel pool. They follow, and Richard competes in a drinking contest against Cody's team, secretly spiking Cody's drink. Jason accidentally consumes the spiked drink, and they win. High and dancing at a party, Jason's behavior becomes amusingly eccentric. He rides a motorcycle and wakes up at the beach the next morning. Meredith's call interrupts him, and he answers to find his family on FaceTime. Unprepared and disheveled, Jason practices his vows while the child approaches him. He manages the situation, but the child's father misunderstands, pushing Jason into the sand. Police arrive and take him to the station, worsening his predicament. In the holding cell, Jason finds himself with Pam, but due to his connections with the police, they release him. Jason asserts his knowledge of his rights as a lawyer, but the police mock him. Richard arrives to bail him out, and Jason walks out in an amusing outfit because it's all that's available. Seeing Richard, Jason's anger boils over, and he informs Richard that he won't drive him to Boca anymore. Instead, he intends to drop him off at his veteran friend Stinky's house and return to Atlanta. However, they discover that Stinky is bedridden due to liver failure and has just a month to live. Stinky's desire is to play bingo, which deeply affects Richard. Faced with Stinky's mortality, Richard realizes he has a last chance to relive his youth. He persuades Jason to take him back to Daytona, where he can be with Lenore and live without regrets. Succumbing to Richard's plea, they return to Daytona Beach. Participating in a flex-off contest against Brian Cody, they impress the crowd with daring stunts. Just before being declared winners, Jason leaves the stage to avoid jeopardizing his career due to the attention. Unwilling to accept defeat, Richard constructs an improvised bazooka to target Brian Cody. This revelation prompts Jason to question Richard's past in the Special Forces, considering his extensive knowledge. Richard discloses that he served in Special Forces, training insurgents from Vietnam to Iraq. He demonstrates his expertise by shooting Cody in the nose, causing bleeding. Later, Cody is hospitalized, and Richard, who previously picked Cody's pocket, gains access to his room. Posing as Cody's father, he instructs the doctor to sedate Cody and even consider pulling the plug. As Jason prepares for their night out, he asks Richard about revealing his Special Forces background to improve his relationship with his father. However, Richard evades the question and instead focuses on critiquing Jason's outfit, deeming it awful and providing him with something else to wear. Later on, they hit the club and reunite with the women. Jason is captivated by Shadia's beauty, and Leonard makes advances toward Richard. The night unfolds with drinking and partying. An altercation arises when some men bully Bradley at the club. Richard intervenes, proposing to settle the matter in the parking lot to avoid causing trouble indoors. Jason is anxious due to their outnumbered position. In the parking lot, Jason initiates a confrontation, but Richard effortlessly defeats most of the men, excluding the one who punched Jason. Richard brings down the aggressor and compels him to apologize to Bradley. Bradley accepts the apology, leaving the defeated men to depart while Richard's prowess leaves everyone in awe. The next morning, Jason accompanies Shadia on a nature campaign. They bond, and Jason nearly leans in for a kiss before an emergency call from Bradley interrupts them. Shadia hurriedly informs them of the situation, prompting their return to the hotel. Upon reaching the hotel, Bradley discloses that Leonard and Richard were abducted by the men from the club. They rush to the men's hotel room, only to discover an unexpected scene. Leonard, Richard, and the men have reconciled. Peace has been established. The group moves on to a karaoke club, where Richard surprises everyone by rapping. Shadia and Jason perform a duet, but Jason's enthusiasm overshadows Shadia's singing, shocking the audience. As the night unfolds, Cody manages to swipe Richard's ID and discovers recreational substances in his prohibited substances. Later that evening, the group reconvenes at the hotel. Richard and Jason have a poolside conversation where Richard expresses gratitude to Jason for his wingman role. The topic shifts to Jason contemplating calling off his wedding. Richard advises him on choosing an interesting partner for marriage, as it's a long commitment. Jason decides it's time to tell Shadia the truth and heads to her room, but Braun unexpectedly pinches him. Cody found information online revealing that Richard isn't a professor and Jason is engaged. Shadia is devastated and orders Jason to leave. Suddenly, the police storm in, discovering Richard's supply of substances in Jason's jacket. In a twist, Jason spots Richard's driver's license on a table, realizing Richard had it all along. After being bailed out the next day, Jason exits his cell in another comical outfit. He confronts Richard, accusing him of manipulating him by withholding the license truth. Richard confesses he wanted Jason to prioritize himself for once, reflecting on his own failings as a father to David. He aims to prevent Jason from following a similar path. Feeling like a last-minute redemption project, Jason tells Richard not to attend his wedding and returns to Atlanta. Subsequent days see Jason preparing for his wedding while Shadia readies to leave Florida. One night, Jason receives a gift from Richard. a camera, and an embroidery project from Stinky. The following day marks Jason and Meredith's rehearsal dinner. Meredith arranges an elaborate performance with Jason, and they sing for their guests. During the performance, a slide presentation plays in the background, gradually transitioning to Jason's Florida photos orchestrated by Richard, unbeknownst to the couple. As the act concludes, Meredith turns to see a shocking photo of Jason. She urges the video to be taken down, but upon encountering a photo of Shadia, Jason musters the courage to assert himself. Unfortunately, Richard silences him by disabling his microphone, rendering his voice unheard. Unable to communicate directly, Jason asks Nick to convey his uncertainty about marrying Meredith. Nick spreads the message until it reaches Meredith, who surprisingly laughs it off. She reveals her intimate encounter with Nick during Jason's absence, prompting him to leave. Outside, Richard and Pam join Jason, and they hop into Pam's ice cream truck to chase Shadia. David tries to intervene but is incapacitated by Pam's taser. They take David along, and while en route, Pam playfully doodles on his face. Traffic forces them to take an alternate route at high speed, capturing the attention of determined officers who pursue them. To lighten their load, Richard instructs Pam to throw objects at the officer's car, creating a diversion. Amid the chaos, David regains consciousness and questions Richard's extraordinary driving skills. Jason urges Richard to reveal the truth to David, leading Richard to finally disclose his past army experiences. In that moment, they manage to catch up to Shadia's bus, which ignores Pam due to the driver's dislike. Richard steers toward the bus to force it to stop, allowing Jason a moment to talk to Shadia. Jason pleads for her to stay, but Shadia's commitment to a protest group project prevents her from doing so. Jason proposes joining her, and Shadia's smile hints at her approval. They share a kiss, albeit cut short by the intervening officers. David defends his son by taunting the officers with legal threats, but they undermine his credibility due to the doodles on his face. Pam surprisingly convinces the officers to release Jason and his friends, as they inexplicably respect him more than others in Florida. Following this, Jason informs David of his decision to go with Shadia, and his father supports him. Jason expresses gratitude to Richard, and, before departing, Richard gifts him a pocket knife adorned with the Special Forces seal. Later that day, David finally drives Richard to his Boca house. They part ways with a commitment to mend their relationship. Upon entering his home, Richard finds Lenore waiting for him. Their long-anticipated intimacy becomes a reality, unhindered. Months pass, and they baptize their son, with Jason and Shadia serving as godparents. Lenore is now married to Richard, making her Jason's legal step-grandmother. She takes this role seriously. As Richard cradles his son, he pledges to become a better father. If you are interested in such films, please proceed to the next video on the screen, and also share your thoughts about this film in the comments. Give us a like and subscribe. Goodbye.